Okay, let's come back down to basics. We all walked in here, awareness was awaring. Awareness walked in here. Awareness has the ability to look at the tree up close. And awareness can walk away and look at the tree from a distance. Awareness appears at this moment to include a point in time and space. I am here, and I see Rachel over there. I turn to awareness is aware, right here, right now. We all have had awareness reporting to a me sense, a me system, a me-ness that goes by a certain name where I get my address. I own such and such an automobile, and I will go get in it. I will drive home to Atlanta or Miami or whatever the case might be. And so it is normal, isn't it, for all of us to believe that there is a me sense. Who says my awareness, my body, my money, my experience, my friend? Well, all the while, awareness is just being aware. All the while, awareness is reporting. And if you leave it alone, it reports amazing things. The belief system that we have grown to have and to lug around with us like a coat of arms I don't know what to call that. It's called ego, me sense, but it is a big piece of luggage. And it doesn't occur to anybody outside of religion or outside of metaphysics that one should understand what ego is and try to get rid of it or subdue it. Subdue it. Subdue it is enough. The purpose of the ancient mysteries was to subdue the testimony of the senses. Subdue them. The Greek mysteries, the Egyptian mysteries, those mysteries that we call early American Masonry. I have belonged to all of the mysteries that promised to give me an answer. I've tried them. They all say essentially the same. The purpose of the mysteries is to subdue the passion. Well, I guess what I want to say before you take a break is that miracles really, really happen. And they don't start happening until we discover that this awareness belongs not to a me, but to an ineffable presence. It's right here, right now. Awareness belongs to this ineffable presence that is right here, right now. Miracles start happening as we let go and give up the foolish notion, or not so foolish notion, because we all had it, and it's important that we have it for a while. But we give up the notion that awareness belongs to me, who has a mind of his own. Awareness doesn't belong to me, who has a mind of its own. It belongs to isness, to the presence, which is the only mind in all existence. And this that seems to be a point of view will suddenly quit being a point of view to become points of view. And lo, miracles start happening. It is a tremendous conversion, is that the word I want? That takes place. And let me give you an analogy to use. The little dot in the center, if you will look at just a single dot there in the center and pretend that that is a pixel. How many do not know what a pixel is? Well, let me tell you, when you turn on your television set, what you actually see on the television screen, a whole bunch of pixels of light. Pixel, a tiny, tiny little thing that if we could get it small enough, we would have it one photon wide. But a pixel is one little dot of light on your television set. Now, if you will imagine that up until this moment, up until you discovered that you wanted to know what it was all about, at the very moment you said, what is it that, why am I here? What is the purpose of life? From that moment, instead of mind being a pixel, it turns into the entire television screen. If you can imagine yourself a little pixel down in the lower left-hand corner of a big television screen, and everybody that goes to your church belongs pretty much there in the lower left-hand corner, same color, and you go over to one pixel having to fend for itself among a million pixels, having to make a living, having to worry about what was going to happen, not happen. All of a sudden you realize, hey, wait a minute, I'm not a pixel. The television screen is being me. All of a sudden, you're not that one pixel in the middle or in the lower left-hand corner having to compete with all the others. Lo and behold, you are the whole of all the pixels. You are the functioning. And what does awareness do? It's a functioning. Awareness is the functioning of mind, of God. Now, for a long time, we thought it was my own functioning. For a long time, we were like the tree that looked down at the shadow and couldn't help but notice that the shadow was all bunched up underneath, strong, virile. And then the shadow began moving across the ground. And it looked away and saw all these other shadows too. And they were all moving away. And then, lo and behold, the tree looks out and it sees its shadow stretched way out to the east because the sun is setting in the west. And the tree says, I am just about to die. And of course, we have seen the clouds come and cross the way, and lo and behold, pixels or trees were just stuffed out right there on the spot. Bam! No more shadow. Well, what science has done, to our great credit, is it has examined everything in the known universe plus an awful lot in the unknown universe that it thinks exists. And science has examined everything, everything. And if we keep looking at that channel enough, what does it lead to? The shadow leads straight away to the tree itself. The tree isn't snuffed out when the light goes away. The tree that doesn't die when the shadow goes way out to the east in the evening. So, from this point on in the seminar, and you're going to talk from pretty much from now on, I would like to have everybody understand that awareness is what we walked into the room with, is what we will walk out with, is what we arrived on Earth in the space-time continuum looking at and listening to. We've never been outside that awareness to make certain that there's another one. This was called solipsistic foolishness. Mrs. Eddy and a preceding Mrs. Eddy by the transcendentalists of the early 19th century spoke of the fact that we couldn't get away from our own mind. And who is in charge of this mind? Well, for a long time we think it's us. And then we come to find out it's God. And we quit worrying about it. But for a while we think it's us. Now the transcendentalists have been trying to tell us this for a long time. When Mrs. Eddy, a lady, wrote about and put metaphysics in Western terms so it could be understood in the last part of the last century, the scientists all looked at it and said, this is a mumbo jumbo, don't bother us with this. Let the physicists, let the theologians look at it. Theologians looked at it and said, this is silly. Let philosophers look at it. So the philosophers looked at it, and they said, no, this must be a theology of some sort. It's silly. Whatever it is, it's silly. And it was labeled silly solipsism. I'm not sure Mrs. Eddy ever discovered this silly solipsism that we're talking about now. I think it has been around from the beginning. There have been those who have come to understand it, see it from the very beginning. And that one is us. In any event, silly solipsism has now reared its head for the scientists to figure out. Lo and behold, mind and what mind is aware of and the very act of awareness itself all seem to be the same. So from this point on, all of us here are going to be just awareness, awaring. We're going to let go of the me who says my awareness to be the divine awareness being. And you will see that miracles can happen to that one. Now, I want to say this quickly. Children do this. By dang. Children come into the world and they do this. they do this. Awareness, the child is aware. The child believes that the frog is the prince. And lo and behold, that's what it is as far as the child is concerned. And the child doesn't worry about what's for dinner or about that ski slope on the beach in New Zealand. I love that. The child just believes because it hasn't learned yet not to believe. And we can all do that again. Now, you think it's impossible to become like a child? I tell you, it isn't. Under the most dreadful circumstances, one can become like a child again. When you can't even move the body, you can still think like the child and bring to mind anything and everything. The child was tended by its parents, human parents. Mother's Day. What a wonderful day. But my mother is here. So is yours. Because where mother exists, only place mother could ever exist, within awareness. Where did mother go? Where did Ruby go? Nowhere. We always say here, and we always say now. And it's always here and now to the little boy and to the little girl. And do you notice how the little boy can ask for anything? And it's there. I asked for a bicycle. I know that my folks couldn't afford a bicycle, but it was there. Well, if your human mother and father would do anything for you, how much more will this presence that is right here, right now, and it's here, right here, right now, how much more will this presence do for us? It will give us anything that is necessary. All that we could ever want. Even scarlet ribbon for our hair. People said, give me peace, equanimity, tranquility, joy. It was exactly the same 2,000 years ago, and it was the same 4,000 years ago. Give me peace. Well, the time for this idea has come again. There isn't a doctor in this room who doesn't know that when he has a patient who believes in him, that he can do much more for that patient than for the one who didn't believe. There isn't a practitioner in this room who doesn't know that when somebody believes in you, that you've got the pizzazz, or that you can do it, that you can help them, that it is much easier to help that one. So, what we believe is very important. It's that luggage we carry around. Now, if I make a statement, A, B, C, what we hear is A, B, C through our belief system. We don't necessarily hear A, B, C. We are so accustomed to the belief system that we lug around with us, that we listen to everything through that belief system. We become very proud of our Harvard education, of our number of years that we have studied this or that or something else. We are very proud of our adversities and our the wars that we fought. It's all part of the belief system that we carry around. So when I say ABC, everybody is still listening through the belief system. It comes to them as a brand new idea to just listen and hear the ABCs. And don't take your belief system to it. And people say, well, how do we do that? How in the world do we do that? Because as a little boy, I leaned against that hot stove and it burned. And so now I know not to lean against a hot stove. So how is it possible not to take the belief system along? And all the belief system is are the many years of experience that we've had, having traveled many wrong paths, listened to many false prophets in order to know the real one. In fact, all of our lives, what we have done really is we sound a note when we tell somebody something, we sound a note. The person we are talking to is listening through their belief system, which is anger or animosity or pride or arrogance or whatever it might be. And they listen through that belief system. So what they hear, not what we said, but they hear an overtone. Because two tones make an overtone. And what they hear is the overtone. Now, I learned by accident 30 years ago when I wrote my first book. It was a book that had overtones in it. And that people, I wrote what I thought. I wrote what I had lived. I wrote out from the standpoint of having done that and proven it. Consequently, there was no bull tails in it. I was telling it as straight as I could, as honestly as I could. And yet other people would bring their overtone, their tones to it, and they would hear quite something else. So by the time I wrote the final book, which is about the child, I learned how to teach with overtones. And let me explain what that is, if I may. I tell a story like a Sufi, like an old Sufi, or like one of the ancient Indian medicine men. I tell a story, and you listen to it. You listen. I tell the same stories over and over because, to be honest, that's all I can do is tell what I have lived. I learned as I gave lectures that I could reverse some of those stories and tell them in a different order, and I would get an entirely different reaction. Sometimes people would double up the knot, and I would see their pain immediately, and I would talk directly to that one so that I could address that pain and anguish. I learned to tell my stories so the overtone would instruct. Now, let me tell you how that works. All of you do it. This isn't new. Everyone uses overtones, especially children, and especially old people who are children. But if I tell a story and you carry your baggage with you and listen to that story, and then I tell another story and you carry the same baggage with you and listen to that story, it's like I had hit 2 notes on the piano, one here and one here. But there's another note that is sounded that I never said with my mouth, and that's the overtone. And that's where the instruction is. And that's why overtones are going on here and now. And it doesn't make any difference what I say. It lies in the listening, which is out there with you. It lies with the awareness that is doing the listening. So I wrote the book called The Child Within Us Lives. Wasn't completely honest with that book because I didn't talk about some of the things that I thought I should not talk about. But I'm willing to now. And I wrote 12 chapters, which I used to call the bone. And those bones are the same that you will find in any life story anywhere in the world, because we all come into this world and commence what appears to be a period of linear time, and then we are disenchanted, then we fight the battle of the world, and then we grow older and sicker and tired of it all, and then we want to give up. And if we are lucky, somewhere along the line, we rediscover the child. It hasn't gone anywhere, but it has been there all the while, leading us by the hand, hoping to get us through every trouble, every trial, every tribulation. Now, some people call this child the soul. Be my guest. Call it whatever is good to you. Call it the original imprint. Call it the divine imprint. Call it spirit. I don't care. But it is the original child of ours. And it's here. Right now, full-fledged, shaken together and running over. And it wants us to get through this time of trial and tribulation. And it wants us to get through with grace and dignity. And it wants us to reign. And we will Each one of us make it. Every butterfly comes out of that cocoon that seems to restrain it and restrict it. We will all rediscover the child because the child is real and the child is here. Now, to the psychologists among us, I understand there are quite a few. I'm not talking about the wounded child. There is a child that's wounded, that's told that Christmas isn't real, that Santa Claus is a myth. What a terrible thing for a child to hear. I'm not talking about the wounded child. I'm talking about the original imprint, the divine of us, the child we were from the beginning, the child made in the image and likeness of God. That child is still here, ripping and roaring and holding our hand, no matter how tough it gets. That child, like the photon, is everywhere present and nowhere absent. That child is all over the mountain at the same time. Just like the photons in this room are all over this room. And they're all over the world. As a matter of fact, the light that is coming through the skylights is bringing information to us right here, right now, infinitely more than the words coming out of my mouth. The photons are telling us what's on the other side of the mountain. What's on the other side of that mountain? The photons in this room are bouncing around and telling us what's in Herzegovina and what's going to happen. The child of us has been all over Dashan. Dashan means big mountain in Chinese. I was telling you about the book I wrote about the child. I divided it into 12 chapters. And then there is a big section at the tail end of that book, which are those 12 chapters repeated, except to infinity. If you were to run that through a computer, you would get circles within circles, wheels within wheels within wheels. And the way that book is best read is you read a chapter up front, then you read anywhere you want to, anywhere strikes you to read, in the back of the book. And it was geared, the book was geared to make overtones, to sound two notes, two sounds. The instruction in that book is in its overtone and not in its words. I tried very hard to have the words be reasonable and logical, because I know that that is expected by the academe, by those who know, by those who've been around, by those who study, go to school. It must be reasonable and logical. You see, that is part of our Greek heritage. But Jesus, thank goodness, and Lao Tzu, thank goodness, preceded Greek reason and logic. Consequently, what they had to say is read and understood outside the boundary of reason and logic. That was why the book, the Gospel, according to Thomas, when it was rediscovered, bear in mind all the book, the gospel, according to Thomas, really is a collection of sayings. I think 126 sayings, something like that. Sayings attributed to the man called Jesus. That book was called one of the heresies in the 2nd century, and it was doomed to be destroyed. But that which is hidden is going to be revealed. And that which is covered is going to be uncovered. So in 1946, that particular book was found again. The Gospel, according to Thomas, which is nothing but 26 sayings by the man, Jesus, by people who loved him and who attended his talks wherever. And they wrote down, Jesus said, and they tried to remember it. Now, because the Bible came up in here, among these questions. The Bible is a great book. It's surely a holy book, as books go. Holy meaning whole or one. But I must say this so that you don't construe me to be anti-Bible or anti-holy book. Remember that anything that is out there appeared within awareness. And the authority lies within awareness. You remember that the man, Jesus himself, said the kingdom of heaven is within. It is without. Now, no Bible had been written at that time. So I would remind everyone to be respectful of the Bible and all holy books, but to remember that the authority lies within awareness. And it's not out there with the book. That book or any other book. It's not out there with this man, that man, or any man by any name. Now, Jesus and Lao Tzu and Buddha and all the lights that I could mention have all said the same thing, that the kingdom of heaven is within. It isn't out there with some leader. It isn't out there with an authority. It isn't out there with a law. It is in the heart. It is within. So those of you who elect ever to read The Child Within Us Lives, remember that the back part of it is to be read just any way you want to, at random. And it will sound an overtone with something that is in the first 12 chapters, somewhere. 12 is a word that has great significance with symbologists and numerologists, and people who dabble in the arcane and the occult, 12 being complete. We have 12 months in the year. There are 12 chapters in the front of that book about the child. Then I don't know how many chapters make up the back. But it is to be read. And remember, your overtone is your own. Remember that your overtone nobody else can speak for. But you, you're the only one It's your overtone. It's immaculate. And you are the authority therein. So, the instruction in that book lies in the overtones, and also in this talk that I'm trying very hard to do here. The real instruction is in your listening, and definitely not in my speaking. Now, before I was struck by the board of whatever I was struck with, I read Scarlett Ribbons to Rachel, these very words, and I got hit in the head. Bam! Rachel said, "You're not supposed to have that kind of illumination. You're not supposed to be illumined like that." But before this, I had called, I wanted to make sure that there was no bullshit in this talk. If you people are turned off by my language, remember that Arjuna was a soldier too. And I just am a latter-day Arjuna. I was an infantry soldier in 2 wars. I did my homework before I could, and I called a man about photons because I wanted to make sure that I had all the latest poop. I didn't want to say anything about the photons that I wasn't supposed to say. I had a question for him, as there are questions in here. Not many, but some. My question for this man who was the authority on photons in the state of Alabama, and perhaps the Southeast, my question was, does the photon run down? Everything else that's physical seems to run down. The law of entropy. The universe began with a big bang and it's supposed to be cooling off, cooling off, cooling off. And eventually the star, the sun, will flare in its dying gasp and so forth. Entropy, cooling off. This man says no. As far as we know, there is no entropy with the photon, but he says you must be very careful talking about the photon because there are 2 schools of thought. Isn't that interesting? 2 schools of thought. You have to be careful talking about photon because the one school of thought will not abide by the other school of thought. I discovered this when I went to Colorado to visit Sandy, sweet Sandy, and stayed at the Enchanted Cottage. I discovered that I went and asked about David Bohm coming to Aspen because Aspen has a study for theoretical and applied physics. And they should know about Dr. Bohm. But I was inordinately put in my place by the lady that I talked to because that school of thought didn't go along with the David Bohm school of thought. One believed one thing about the photon and the other believed another thing about the photon. Now, does this sound familiar in religion? There is a school of thought about what is it, God, omnipresent being, presence. There is another school of thought, the principle, life, truth, love, spirit, not material at all. So I found out in Aspen that I didn't dare talk about one line of physical being because the physicists didn't agree. Now, the question is asked, how quickly can one do this? Put off the old man and put on the new. How quickly can it be done? Well, it can't be done quickly, but it can be done. Answer that question. I used to think there was no old man to put down. There's just God. And God is good. So how can there be an evil old man to put down? But then, by the time the day was over, I had to go to the bathroom. And the next morning, I had to eat. So it seemed like that old man was still around. But we can get rid of the me who says my awareness. We can subdue that one and let awareness be freely aware. Again, about how quickly. A lady called not too long ago, and she said that all the masters in India were dying. They all had something that's causing them to die. Was there ever a time when awareness is not aware of good and evil? Well, I don't know of any time that I cannot be equally aware of what is not present. At the same time, I am aware of what is present. Now, that sounds like metaphysical hoi polloi, but it isn't. If we look outside the window, we can see lots of trees out there. And just outside the door is a tupelo, a white maple. It has a bluebird house in it. That white maple grows to be the tallest tree in the eastern United States. If in a wooded situation, it can grow 200 feet high. We have one in our backyard that isn't that high, but if it ever falls down, it's going to crunch a wood saw. The minute I look at a tree and say it is a maple tree, at the same time I know it is not all the other trees. So the is-nots are the means by which I perceive what is. So with knowing what is a fact, we also know what isn't. We look at our circle again, we see allness, the big circle. Awareness, that is, isness. Call it whatever you like. Call it God, call it totality. You will notice a little dot in the middle is awareness. And then you will notice another circle, itself. Mind aware of itself. Mind aware of what awareness is, mind aware of what the mind is. Mind also aware of what is not and could never be, but seems very real, as long as we believe it. All that is going on is isness aware of itself. We are that awareness. We are the verb of that combination. We are awareing happening. God aware of itself. We are what is active. Why is life living? To be aware of itself. The human scene appears to be equally fraught with is not. By the way, is awareness gendered? One of the questions here. Is awareness gendered? No, awareness is not gendered. Awareness includes within itself all there is to male and female. Awareness, we identify as awareness. We have immediately stopped identifying as gendered being. I am a man. It is my place to do thus and such. I am a woman. I am supposed to do thus and such. We identify as awareness, which includes them both. And boy, what a weight off your back when all of a sudden you can say and know what you're saying and know you know it. That awareness is all there is to both them. Isn't it? Isn't it? Right now? Now that doesn't mean that you get up and walk to the wrong restroom. You better go to the right one. You know, the immediate body that you look down at. You better abide by its rules in this world. But to identify as awareness is to identify as all there is to all gender. Now, one other thing. Is the church within awareness, or is awareness in the church? People are always saying to me, since I come from the Bible Belt, the buckle of the Bible Belt, the buckle of the Bible Belt, the little hole that the thing sticks there, part of the Bible. What church do you belong to? And what a surprise it comes when I say, because it's the truth, all churches belong to me. All churches belong to me. Why? I identify as awareness, not as one who belongs to this church or somebody else's. Every church has its place within awareness. And I've stopped arguing with them. They have not stopped arguing with me, but I have stopped arguing with them. I do not care whether you are baptized or dunked or sprinkled. I think it's wonderful to be baptized and dunked and sprinkled. We are awareness, the functioning of the ineffable, which is present in this moment, as arithmetic is, as music is. You know, Pythagoras was quite a guy. I'm surprised I remembered that name. Pythagoras was a Greek philosopher who said everything is arithmetic. Everything is arithmetic. I didn't say everything is arithmetic. And Einstein said that too. Something like 4,000 years later, about that number of years later, said everything is arithmetic. We now have quantum mechanics on the scene saying everything is arithmetic. Everything, it can happen in the framework of an unreasonable, illogical something. We don't know what to call that something, so we will, for the time being, call it whatever. Holographic. A book was written about a holograph. Do anybody here not know what a holograph is? Well, a holograph is just an image of an image. If we look at a holograph, it seems like we can see through it. We can see its right side and its left side. But it is an image of an image. Now we have quantum mechanics saying that everything we see, including our physical body, including the chair we sit on, including the pants we put on this morning, the 4 pairs I put on this morning, is an image of something. They don't know whether to spell that something with a capital S or a little s. I choose to call it something with a capital S, for which I am the awareness, for which I am at the moment, a point of view, trying to articulate when I can't, a point of view, a line of thought, a plane of thinking. All of you who are not mathematicians, please raise your hand. Good God. I'm glad. You all notice that we have a 3-dimensional space-time continuum in which we speak of a point as having no space. A point is a point, it occupies no space. Well, let's get back to the little photon that is winging around the room. It does not occupy any space either. It has no mass. Photon has no mass. You will notice then that we say that an infinity of points makes a line. A line is a point of thought carried to infinity. If you take a line of thought and carry that to infinity, you have a plane. You will notice that each dimension moves away from the other dimension at 90 degrees. So space-time is a movement of 90 degrees away from length, width, and breadth. And I think that that's as much as you have to know about quantum mechanics to be a quantum physicist, is that each dimension beyond space-time, 4-dimensional, is a 90-degree move away. Now, when all of us here close our eyes and think about Mount Everest, if you will do that just for a minute, you think about Mount Everest. You can see it. You can open your eyes if you like. During the time that you thought about Mount Everest, you saw it. If you were practiced a little bit, you can smell the cold air and you can feel it as well. You can touch it. You can smell the glaciers. You can smell the grass. you took in that moment when you closed your eyes a 90-degree turn away from the fourth dimension into the fifth dimension. How long does it take for mind to be aware of itself? Well, this is summed up in all of the holy books, all of them, especially in the Bible, as a single word called eternity. So God is eternally plumbing the depth of His infinite qualities and attributes. Qualities, I can't say that, and attributes.